Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our quarter three economic briefing today. Very interesting times we're living in, isn't it? I was looking back before we started today, and the last time we did a quarterly economic survey presentation, there's a guy called Boris Johnson that was Prime Minister. He still had a full cabinet. The domino effect hadn't quite happened yet. And there was a lot of other things that we look back on now, maybe with a bit of fondness as to what they were like rather than what they are like. But we'll get into that in a minute. My name's Chris Fletcher. I'm the Policy Director at Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce, and it's great to see so many of you here this morning. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's event, RDS, that's Research and Development Specialists. And as the name implies, they specialise in R&D for businesses, and Chris Kinane will give a short update and presentation on some of the work that they do after we've heard the main quarterly economic survey presentation from Subra. And like I said, just thank you so much for your help and support in putting the event on today. I'd also like to welcome representatives who are here on a trade mission from the Federation of Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and Industry. So you're very welcome joining us today. I know we've got a couple of other sessions lined up later on this morning, including one with Andy Burnham and also the trade team here, led by Susanna. So it's great to see you here today joining us for this event. The agenda for today, we're going to do a brief intro. Subra's then going to do the agenda for today. I'll just mute myself on YouTube. I'll come back to that in a minute. The agenda for today, just going to do a quick introduction. Subra then going to pick up on the main QES presentation. As I said, then we're going to hear from Chris Kinane from RDS, today's sponsors. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So, I've already mentioned it once. We are live streaming yet again on YouTube. So welcome to anybody that's following it on YouTube. If you've got any questions, please put it in the chat box, and we'll try and get around to as many of those as possible. So, without any further ado, I will hand over to Subra. Subra.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the Q3 briefing, and many of you have attended the briefing before, but if you haven't, just a quick word on what the quarterly economic survey is. It is the UK's largest business sentiment, business confidence survey. It's run by Chambers of Commerce and has been run by Chambers of Commerce for well over 30 years. So the first 2 years was in the late 1980s. And since then, we have asked the same questions every quarter, which means we have this rich time series of data which can track all of the major economic events of the past sort of 30, 34 years. So it's interesting because the presentation today is for the current quarter, the quarter that is due to end on Friday. So it's the 3 months from June to September. And that's important because we are way ahead of the curve. We do the field work, we do the analysis, and we publish the results in the same quarter, which means we actually get a forward view about what might come in the national data position, and I'll touch upon that later. The QES is extremely reliable because of the response rate, and so thank you for those of you who did fill in the survey this quarter. Please continue to do so because it's extremely important. And as I keep saying, these results are not invented. I'm just replaying back to you what you have told us in the first instance. These are your responses that have been analyzed and then are being played back. And we have a very sizable response rate, 6,000 plus nationally, approximately 300 consistently every quarter here in Greater Manchester, about 700 to 800 across the Northwest. And because of the sample size and because of the way it is analyzed, it's extremely reliable. We have been able to both prove and disprove other big economic issues as well. And then finally, who uses the QES? All policymakers do so. So you see references to business surveys and Chamber of Commerce surveys in documents that come off the Treasury, Bank of England, etc. The Monetary Policy Committee uses the QES results as one of the many inputs that they use when they are setting interest rates as well. And ultimately, if we are getting the results right, if it matches what you are seeing on the ground, hopefully you as business leaders and business owners will be able to use the QES results. And that's ultimately what we want. We want you to be able to use it. So what are we going to cover? Okay, so what are we going to cover this morning? I'm going to touch upon the current macroeconomic situation. We can't escape that. That's all over the media at the moment. Based on the QES results, we calculate what is called the Greater Manchester Index. It is one number that indicates the current state of the Greater Manchester economy. And it gives us, in a movement in the Greater Manchester Index, gives us an indication of where the economy is as of now. The component parts of the Greater Manchester Index then, which is made up by domestic demand, overseas demand, the classic macroeconomic indicators like cash flow positions that businesses are facing, investment propensity, business confidence, quite important. And then I'll touch upon the labor market data. And on the labor market data, we do have a new initiative, which the Chamber of Commerce will be leading on, and that's the local skills improvement plan, but more on that later. And then finally, I'll finish with some comments on the mini budget, And as Chris called it, it was mini budget mega carnage in the markets, as you know. Okay, allegedly. According to the data, anyway. So just one thing to note, when you see the charts and when I mention numbers, what I'm referring to are balances. So it's the proportion difference between the positive responses to a question and the negative responses to a question. So it's not straight percentages, it's actually a proportion difference. And again, what that helps us is instead of saying X percentage of people said a positive response, X percentage of people said things will stay the same, etc. That balance actually helps us track the movement from one quarter to the other. So unless otherwise specified, I'm referring to balances. Okay? So just bear that in mind as well. So then, what is the Greater Manchester Index? The Greater Manchester Index, as I was saying, is your key takeaway from today's presentation. It's one number that gives you an indication of where the Greater Manchester economy is as of today. It's made up of these 7 measures that come from the QES. So it's domestic sales, domestic orders, export sales, export orders, the 2 measures of business confidence, so confidence that turnover can be maintained, confidence that margins or profitability can be maintained, and then finally, capacity utilization. Okay. So those are the 7 measures that make up the Greater Manchester Index. So then on to the results now. And the first thing to say is that the Greater Manchester Index has actually declined by nearly 18 points between the second quarter, so the 3 months ending the 30th of June, and the current quarter. That's an 18-point dip, which is quite stark. It's a sudden, sharp decline. Not quite as sharp and sudden as what happened during the COVID pandemic. So if you look at the difference between the first quarter of 2020 and the second quarter of 2020, that was dire. This is not that dire, but still, it isn't great news that the Greater Manchester Index has gone down by nearly 18 points. So that's your main takeaway from today. So what contributed to that decline in the Greater Manchester Index? The first thing is that domestic demand has gone down. When we know that, I'll present national data to back some of these findings as well. So domestic data has gone down in services. Services, as you know, makes up over 80% of the economy. It has gone down in construction as well. Manufacturing has actually improved slightly between the 2 quarters. However, there was a 23-point dip in manufacturing between the first quarter of 2022 and the second quarter of 2022, which means any upturn we are seeing now is also likely to be the low base effect. So you're starting from such a low base that any increase is going to be sort of amplified and magnified by simply the fact that things have turned around slightly. But we'll have to keep an eye on this because manufacturing sector is particularly under distress, as revealed by cash flow positions, etc. And we'll see how that is going to pan out. So as has happened with domestic demand, export sales have also gone down. And this, classical economic theory says when you have very low exchange rates, exports should pick up. We do have a slightly different situation in the UK. In this quarter, export sales have declined. And that's, again, that mirrors what national position is. Cash flow positions have weakened, demand has gone down, costs have gone up, inflation is at record high. Why wouldn't cash flow positions be adversely affected? That's exactly what has happened. However, the one interesting thing and a very positive development is that capacity utilization has gone up. Now, it's 3 or 4 quarters now that we have seen capacity utilization actually go up. It was in the 30s, it went to the 40s, and then it was in the high 50s. It's just crossed 60% capacity utilization. That's still way below what should be optimum. What we expect to be optimum capacity utilization is somewhere between 80 to 85%. so that there is still room for expansion if it is needed, but you're still not, have spare capacity that is underutilized. But capacity utilization has gone up in this quarter, and that's good news. And then on the labor market, again, you're quite aware of this. Historic number of vacancies, recruitment difficulties, and businesses are still trying to recruit. And 84% of those who are trying to recruit are trying to fill full-time positions. So again, that's great news that we are actually looking at full-time positions. But along with that increase in recruitment activity, recruitment difficulties have also gone up. And that's, again, there's no surprise, is it? Because of all of the other data that we have seen. However, business investment has gone down. And again, as I presented some data last quarter, business investment in the UK has been quite low, and that's where R&D tax credits and other measures will actually play a big part in. Because the UK lags behind the OECD average and the G7 average on business investment, and within the UK, the Northwest lags behind, say, London and the Southwest. And just as a measure of R&D tax credits, the Northwest makes about 10% of the overall number of claims, but only 6% of the financial value. Okay. That isn't good enough, I don't think. Whereas in London, London makes a fifth of the number of claims, but actually nearly 32% in financial value. So they make more claims, but their claims are also much higher in value as compared to the Northwest. So that, again, is something that we do need to correct. And finally, high inflation. I don't need to tell you about this. Inflation has been a major concern for quite some time, but I do have some interesting stats on inflation next. So these three charts, to me, summarize the current state of the UK economy. Okay. So what do we have now? Let's look at monthly GDP growth. Monthly GDP growth is bound to be volatile because we are measuring activity from one month to the next. But that's the point I'm trying to convey, that we do have lots of uncertainty, aka we have lots of volatility in the markets at the moment. And as a result, you can see the sort of the ECG-style spikes up and down, up and down. So in March, there was a 0.2% decline. It then went up. It then went down. In the latest data for July, actually the decline, the decline in June was actually quite stark. In July, it did slightly recover. However, in Q2, we had negative growth as well across the economy. Okay. So what does that mean for the current quarter? And I think what we can see from the data that we have access to is that quarterly GDP growth is likely to flatline. We expect maybe 0% growth or even a decline, possibly. And the current situation is not really going to help. So that's GDP. What about inflation? The good news on inflation is that it has actually come down slightly from July to August. So CPI, which is consumer price inflation, that's what you and I pay at the shops when we do our shopping. It went down from 10.1% to 9.9%. Marginal decline, not significant, but it is still a marginal decline. But the interesting bits are not there. It is not on consumer price inflation that the interesting point is. That's on what is called the producer price inflation. This affects manufacturers predominantly, but all producers. Output PPI measures the price at which manufacturers are selling their goods, and that is currently at 16.1%. So which means prices relative to last August have now gone up by about 16%. But it was at 16.5%, it's now 16.1%, so again a marginal decline. And then input PPI, which is the price of all of the input materials that goes into the production process, that's 20.5% inflation. Okay. Now this is obviously going to feed into the rest of the economy because these are the goods that we consume. So any increase in producer price inflation affects the manufacturing industry, in turn affects everybody else. And then finally, we have job vacancies. So 1.26 million job vacancies are currently open, and in GM, as in many other parts of the country, there are now more job seekers than there are unemployed. Okay. That's a trend that we have had for a few months now. So one of the issues that the media has been, and you'd have heard this no doubt, is this whole issue of stagflation. Are we in stagflation at the moment? So we have a stagnant economy, as you can see from the GDP numbers. We have very high inflation. The third element of stagflation is high unemployment. That's not something that we face at the moment. Now, again, things might change, because if the downturn is marked and pronounced, then we might actually see job vacancies. And we have anecdotally heard that some businesses have actually advertised for vacancies, but then withdrawn them because of current situation. So make of it what you will, but that's the economic data. So that's national. So I'm going to helicopter into Greater Manchester now. So these measures are all from the quarterly economic survey. And as I was saying earlier, on demand, there has been a decline, a quarterly decline on both domestic demand and overseas demand. But the picture is a bit more complicated than that. Now, on domestic sales, which is the current sales, the sales that have taken place in a quarter, in this instance, the latest quarter that we are in, there was a decline of about 5-6 points. So from the, from around 26, 27 down to the early 20s. That's across the board. But look at that sharp decline in advance orders. So domestic orders is your order book, right? And that decline is actually much more pronounced, and where we are almost near zero at the moment. So orders are not being placed. And so it's what, 0.2, 3 points. Again, that is going to worry a lot of manufacturers. And again, added to supply chain pressures, added to the high cost of inputs, if that's translating into a general downturn, then we do have to be worried about that. So that's on overseas, that's on domestic demand. I do have a slide sort of breaking it down by sector, but also by size of business. Again, that presents some interesting facts. So let's look at overseas demand. And on overseas demand, again, there has been a decline. So both export sales, so current sales in the quarter, and advance orders have gone down. They are just about zero at the moment. Susanna, do you have any comments on international trade?
Seen in the past few months, where everything has been kind of showing a decline, generally speaking, both in export values and the number of shipments.
Okay, so both export values and the number of shipments have declined. Are there any exporting businesses amongst you? So perhaps you've seen some, but does this picture match what you are facing on the ground, at least in terms of domestic demand? Not necessarily. Okay. And is that because of a sectoral difference, do you think, or? Right. Okay. But have you had any sort of downturn recently, or is it as it all held steady? Right. Sure. Sure. Right. Okay. That's actually quite interesting, because it might explain that there are some very serious sectoral variances as well. That's what I'll go to next. So that domestic demand picture, which was in the previous slide, I've just broken it down two ways. One is by the size of the business, and then the other is by sector. And the data is kind of very marked. It's the smaller businesses across the board. It's the businesses with less than 50 employees that are most affected. And as you can see, both balances relating to domestic sales and domestic orders are now very firmly in negative territory. So it's -2.5 for domestic sales, just about -2 for domestic orders. So it's the smaller businesses which are worst affected by the current economic climate. The sweet spot seems to be the mid-sized businesses, okay, where things have actually shown a slight improvement between the last quarter and the current quarter. And the bigger businesses, they hold steady, because they have greater purchasing power, much more negotiating capability, economies of scale. They can actually negotiate much better prices, which means they can maintain their sales as well. So in other words, the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's are probably not going to be affected at the moment, also because of the nature of the goods that they sell. But then an independent retailer based in the Arndale Centre might actually face the current economic climate much more than a bigger business. So it's the smaller businesses, with those with less than 50 employees, which have been worst affected. And then when we look at the domestic demand data by sector, again, that's magnificent, absolutely remarkable, that we have this sudden and sharp decline in B2B services. And if you remember the data, for some of you may have attended the previous quarter's presentation, actually B2B services was holding okay in the last quarter. And again, B2B services is made up of accountants, lawyers, the essential services that many businesses need. But if that is also being cut, then it might be a very firm indication that discretionary spend on, say, marketing, on training, on media, on advertising, etc., that's all being slashed out, or even IT services. That is probably what it indicates, that even when we receive the sudden decline in B2B services. B2C services, business to consumer spending, has been struggling for some time. So advance orders is at 0. The current sales is at 6. That's roughly where it was in the previous quarter. And again, if household budgets are being squeezed, then our own discretionary spend is also going to be affected. However, a massive number of people went on holiday this year. So that, again, that would have favorably affected B2C services. It was a historic high for a number of holidays taken in 2022's summer. Construction, volatile, but is holding steady, and you just need to take a survey of the number of cranes in and around the city center. Is there an equal amount of activity elsewhere? Not so sure, but at least in some parts of GM there is a huge amount of construction activity that's taking place. And then manufacturing, as I said, has had an improvement relative to the previous quarter. But again, we would need to see that improve further. So there are some very clear sectoral variances which might explain the different experience of different businesses. And there is also a very big difference depending on the size of the business as well. Now, that's what we have found in the QES. Can we back it up with any national data? And it turns out that we can. The national data perfectly matches what we are, and this is what always happens. The QES gives a very clear and strong indication of what's going to happen nationally. Because I have looked at the data for the whole of the Northwest. I've looked at the data for the whole of the north of England, London, Birmingham, and even the national data, and they all mirror our QES data perfectly. Okay, there has been a decline on all of those regions. So let's look at the chart on the left, which has got 4 measures. So we've got retail sales volume and retail sales value. Okay. So the orange line and the pink line there. And what you see is that until about April, May, that's an important point because April, May was 2021 was when we saw inflation starting to creep up. Okay. Until then, so starting from just before the pandemic until about April, May of 2021, the movement in retail sales volume and retail sales value was more or less similar. However, when inflation started picking up, the price naturally went up, but then the volume of goods consumed has started going down. So at the moment, we are paying a lot more in price for consuming an equal amount or possibly a lot less. Okay. So, and retail sales did go up in value, that you would expect because of the higher prices. Many businesses are increasing the price at which they sell their goods and services, and the latest QES data says that it is about 2/3, 65 to 66% of respondents have increased their prices to keep up with the higher input costs. But we have also seen that reduction in volume, and the volume has kept consistently coming down. So that's retail sales, a good indication of consumer spending, so what you and I spend. And then we have the index of production, which is this black line here. So that's a good view of the manufacturing sector. Flatlining more recently. There was that decline, and then there has been that flatlining across the economy. Okay. We only have data until July for manufacturing and services, but retail sales, we do have the data for August as well. August is usually a pretty decent month for retail sales because of summer. You spend a lot more, but actually that decline in August is a bit concerning. Okay. And then on index of services, again, there's a marginal increase between June and July, but I expect it likely flatline between July and August as well, because consumer spending is a big component within in services. Now, another interesting measure to look at is e-commerce or internet sales. This is an index number, hence why you see numbers above 100. Now, at the peak of the pandemic, internet sales was about 1/3 of overall retail sales. And we know, we were all doing Amazon and eBay and all of the others during the pandemic. But that's one point, that the proportion of internet sales has gone down. Okay, that's fine. However, what is more important to note is that between, say, February, March of 2022 and now, internet sales have also been going down. So it is not just that the consumption has been diverted elsewhere from physical retail to online retail. The fact remains that the overall online retail has also kept going down. Again, indicates squeeze on consumer spending and household budgets. Okay. And then finally, construction. Construction remains fairly stable. We have data until July, but as you can see, between, say, January 2022 and July, it has been fairly stable. So that's the demand data. The key message being we have had a downturn between the previous quarter and the current quarter. Smaller businesses are most affected, and then there are some big sectoral variances as well. So moving on then to cash flow positions, and this is where there is even more bad news, I'm afraid. So cash flow positions never recovered after the pandemic. Okay. We saw that immense squeeze on cash flow during the pandemic, but then the reopening of the economy happened, but all businesses had to spend money on COVID-related adjustments, right? So that took up a huge amount of spend. Then we had wage inflation, again, taking up more of the spend. We have had the increase in the price of input materials, which again affects cash flow. And what we have heard from speaking to businesses like yourselves is that in some sectors there is more of a pressure because, let's say, on imported materials, for example, a lot of working capital is actually stuck because an order is placed. We have international supply chain disruption. We have problems elsewhere, say China and the Far East. So instead of getting materials delivered in a few weeks, which was what was probably happening, it is now a few months. Yeah, do you agree with that? Okay, that's good. And then also, the price of shipping has gone up. And we have heard that the price of a 40-foot container has went from something like 1,200 before the pandemic to 17,000 as the most recent. So 17,000 pounds to ship goods in a 40-foot container from China to the UK. That's a huge increase in price. That's what we are reckoning with at the moment. And the fall in the price of the pound is not going to help. So all of that has put pressure on cash flow. Cash flow is very firmly in negative territory now. So across the board, it's about -11. So a lot more businesses are facing cash flow pressures relative to those who have said that they have actually had even a slight increase. Now, looking at that cash flow data by size of business and the sector confirms that demand data. The smaller businesses with less than 50 employees are most affected again, -18.5. So, the pressure on smaller businesses now seems to be huge. The sweet spot, again, is the medium-sized business. Larger businesses are not affected in a big way, but again, the larger businesses tend to have better lines of credit, probably cheaper lines of credit, and so they are probably likely to be less affected than, say, a small independent retailer. And then looking at the sectoral picture, there has been a decline for both B2C services and B2B services, but that hasn't excluded either manufacturing or construction. So cash flow positions across the board have come down. And again, if you have any comments on this, very happy to take them. Does this match what you're finding, at least amongst your clients? Okay, so that's good that the picture is reflective of what you're seeing on the ground as well. And then finally, on business confidence, and we had a discussion on business confidence last quarter. Business confidence had held fairly steady until the second quarter of 2022. And we talked about the fact that business people have become a lot more resilient. Faced the pandemic, faced huge energy prices, came out of it. At least in our kind of personal resilience, mental resilience, that should have helped. That experience should have helped. That's what we were thinking as at the end of the second quarter. But things have taken a slight downturn now. And across all the three major sector groups, services, manufacturing, and construction, we have seen a reduction in business confidence. And this, again, please remember, is split into two measures. That's confidence in turnover, i.e., the optimism that you can maintain your overall revenues. The worst affected sector seems to be services. Okay, and then any downturn in services is going to have a big impact on the economy because, as I keep saying, it's 80% of the overall economy. However, when it comes to profitability, which is optimism, that you can maintain your profits or margins, actually that's looking even worse, particularly for the manufacturing sector, where profitability confidence is now well below zero. So for both services and manufacturing, it is below zero. And construction has also had a decline. And we know that in the construction sector, the pressures around margins have been around for quite some time. We've heard that repeatedly from even the first-tier contractors, that their margins are actually quite tight. It's come up for discussion repeatedly. Okay, so confidence has taken a hit in this quarter. And what does that mean for business investment? And I touched upon business investment earlier. We do have a problem with business investment. Generally in the UK, business investment has actually lagged behind. But the important point is this: between the second quarter and the current quarter, we have had a further decline in the intention to invest. So this, please remember, is a forward-looking indicator. We are asking businesses whether they intend to invest on capital equipment, to expand capacity, etc., in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. Under the current state, I don't think investment plans will be brought forward. And what is even more worrying is that despite the super deduction scheme, the 130% credit for eligible investment, business investment hasn't really picked up. So that, again, is a cause for concern. And then investment on training. Again, we talk of labor force issues, recruitment challenges, etc. When there is a downturn, budgets that are slashed first include training budgets, IT budgets, etc. And that's probably what we are seeing here, that investment in training has also gone down more recently. Right, so. And then I come over to the labor market data. Okay, and this is extremely important and sort of sets the context for our discussion later on the local skills improvement plans. Now, what I have done is to put the Greater Manchester Index, so the yellow bars there represent the Greater Manchester Index. And then there are two other lines. The green line is recruitment difficulties, and the black line there is the percentage of businesses. So here it is not a balance, it's percentage for both of those measures. The percentage of businesses who attempted to recruit in a particular quarter, and the percentage of businesses that reported having faced recruitment difficulties. This will come as no surprise to you, but it is very interesting that whenever there is a period of economic upturn, as more and more businesses try to recruit, recruitment difficulties also go up. So if you compare it with the sort of the taller bars in that list of skyscrapers for the Greater Manchester Index, you can see that the proportion of businesses who are trying to recruit in the immediate aftermath. Remember, the Greater Manchester Index is a forward measure. It gives you an indication of what's going to come in the next few months. So whenever the Greater Manchester Index goes up, we actually see an increase in both recruitment and also recruitment difficulties. And in the most recent quarter, we have seen a decrease in the proportion of businesses who have actually tried to recruit. Again, the Greater Manchester Index has gone down. The economy is not doing great. But this is an important point that I want to make. Now is the time to invest on skills. Now is the time to invest in training, because we will have an upturn. It might come 6 months from now. It might come 1 year from now. Can't predict that. However, until such time, this is the time to invest on training, on skills, on upskilling, on reskilling, on workforce development, and all of that essential things. Because if we lose this opportunity now, in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, to invest heavily on skills and upskilling, reskilling, all of that, then when the economy does improve, when we see growth, we are just going to go back to square one and then face even worse recruitment difficulties. Okay? So this is the time to invest, and that sort of sets the context for the local skills improvement plans, which we will come to in a moment. Now, the other thing that we have asked is about measures that businesses have already taken to address the recruitment difficulties. And essentially, almost all of these measures, like increasing the advertising spend, increasing the spend on recruitment, using new recruitment methods, using social media for recruitment, for example, offering better salaries. Businesses say they have attempted all of these. So you can see that, in some cases, 80% of the businesses have said that they're making their jobs flexible, they're increasing salaries, yet we face numerous challenges. And so there is a clear supply problem here. We have I just want to caveat one thing. We are facing a downturn at this moment, but do remember, Greater Manchester is a 70 billion economy. Okay. 1.35 million workers. Until before the COVID pandemic, the economy was growing at an average of 2 to 2.5% every year. That's higher than national average. Okay, and even before the financial recession of 2008-2009, until sort of GVA data started being gathered for local regions, GM was growing at about 3%. And in some years at twice the national average. So despite the current economic climate, we have to bear in mind that this is a massive economic power center. It is the power in the Northern Powerhouse. That's Greater Manchester. So, we irrespective of all of these current disappointing news, we're going to see the economy grow. We're going to see massive increase in investment. We're going to see massive demand for labor and so on. And that is why I keep saying we have a supply problem on the labor market. We need talent. We need the upskilling and all of the skills upgrades that we need. Okay. Right. And then there are some barriers to training as well. So we asked you, do you face any barriers? And many of you have said, actually, there are some barriers. A quarter of you have reported that you have no barriers that you face on training, so the internal or the organizational barriers. However, there are two things which stand out for me. One is obviously the cost of training. Right? So budgets are tight, and so you can't invest. Cash flow positions are weak. There is no intention to invest now. There is no intention to expand capacity. Why would you invest on training? And as I said, this is the time to invest. So we do have a scheme. There is a Skills for Growth scheme that the Chamber is a big part of. Again, that offers access to training. But the other important measure is what we need to tackle, which is the lack of staff time. Now, if you face recruitment difficulties and you can't recruit fast enough, then obviously you are not in a position to release existing staff time for training. So again, if we are actually going to make a meaningful contribution to addressing the training problem, this is something that we have to address. That staff time should be released for training. And we can come up with numerous measures to do that. And then on external training barriers, a fifth of the respondents have said that they do not have training available in the relevant subject area. There is, in some cases, there is no provision locally. But again, one of the main causes is that external training is sometimes too expensive. Okay, so again, the cash flow pressure is affecting that. However, we do think that we now have a potential solution, or at least the beginnings of a solution in the Greater Manchester Local Skills Improvement Plan. Chris, do you want to touch upon anything? Okay, so the Local Skills Improvement Plans, the genesis of it was in the Further Education White Paper, which was published, I think, in January or February of 2021. And it said two things. One is that employers should be put at the heart of the skills system. Okay, so you have to, as employers, have to influence the skills system. And we have had a similar initiative, and that's why I want to highlight the difference between previous schemes and this. So between 2013 and 2017, we had what was called the employer ownership of skills. And the main lesson for us from that was that employers said, we do not want to own the skill system. We want to influence the skill system. We want to contribute our views. We want a skill system that is responsive. We want a skill system that we can easily access and navigate through. But obviously, we do not want to own the skill system, right? So that's an important thing. And we think the Chamber, as an anchor institution in GM, with access to all of the business networks, with access to all of the training providers and the learning providers that we work with, and just the public sector coordination with the local councils, etc., we think we can make a very meaningful contribution to all of post-16 technical education through the local skills improvement plan. So the objective is the chamber acts as an anchor institution, bringing learning providers and employers together with the other stakeholders, city councils, because we have the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. They all have their strategy documents, they have their economic growth plans. Those will all need to be taken into account to come up with a local skills improvement plan for GM. And there is something else that we want to do as well as part of the LSIP, which is at the moment, the assessment of needs of skills is actually done at a city region level. And we know, for instance, that the demand in Stockport is completely different to what it might be needed in Oldham or Rochdale. Manchester city centre needs very different skills to what might be needed in the media city development in Salford. That means the gathering of data and the assessment of needs must be done at a local level and must be done on an unprecedented scale. So we can't just speak to a few businesses to decide. We actually have to speak to thousands. And that's what we hope we will do as part of the LSIPs. There will be regular updates and reports, just keep you informed, and obviously keep the policymakers and decision makers informed. And we do have lots of expertise. And if any of you have operated in the construction sector, you know that we develop in-house methodology to come up with a construction pipeline analysis. Essentially, we do an economic modeling of the construction sector for the next 3 or 4 years. And then we do a labor forecast based on the construction economic model as well. And those are things that we have expertise in, which is why I think we are ideally positioned to lead the development of the local skills improvement plan. And then I'll end with one slide on the Chancellor's mini budget. So this was the fiscal statement that came out on the 23rd of September, last Friday. The implementation of many of the promises that Liz Truss had made during her leadership campaign. The leadership campaign platform for Liz Truss was low taxes, small government, cut regulation, etc. And to an extent, that's what the current government has started doing. So there is the good, the bad, and the ugly in this. Probably weighting towards the bad and the ugly, perhaps. But let's look at the good news first. The reversal to NI increases, which, for a small business, cost of employment is a big barrier, isn't it? So any decrease in national insurance contributions, and this is something we have called for even during the pandemic. When business support was being announced, we did call for a decrease in the cost of employment, particularly for smaller businesses. So that reversal to the national insurance increase and the health and social care levy, which was due to come into effect next April, that has been cancelled. So that's good news that we have had the reversal. There is a reversal to the rise in corporation tax, which was announced by the one before. Chancellors change very quickly. And then there are the cuts to personal and income tax, and probably the most controversial one, the scrap in the 45% rate for the high earners, 150K and above, but the surcharge remains. But it is a regressive measure. By no means can you argue that this is actually a progressive measure. And then we have the cuts to stamp duty. And that is particularly interesting because we've kept on saying, all policymakers in the UK have said, the problem in UK housing is not demand, it is supply. We don't build enough houses. And if we take on, we have the Help to Buy, then there was another one before that. We have had all of these measures focused on the demand side, i.e. helping customers buy houses. But what happens when you have Help to Buy? If you get a 25% interest-free loan for 5 years, that's immediately going to translate into higher house prices. So a reduction in stamp duty will translate into higher house prices. Some people who have actually concluded the deal but not signed the agreement would benefit, no doubt. But actually, very soon we will find that house prices will either stay the same, during the downturn we would expect to decrease, or it might actually decrease. And we have seen that, combined with the fact that mortgages have become a lot more expensive. So we might actually see a reduction in house prices anyway. So the cuts to stamp duty, etc., is only going to stimulate the demand side. It doesn't do much for supply. That's not great. And then this, the cap on the bankers' bonuses was scrapped as well. Again, not a progressive measure. Cannot argue for that. But another good measure was the reintroduction of battery shopping for foreign tourists. And this was not an ideal measure, which was introduced actually by the previous government. I think it was probably about 2 years ago. There was the sudden announcement that VAT-free shopping for overseas visitors was going to be cancelled because it was way too difficult to administer. But that has now been reintroduced. It could help some of the big shopping centers, especially in the city center regions and elsewhere. So those are, it's a mixed bag. There are some measures, but the key concern is this. Because there have been tax cuts announced, there is the energy support. The total cost is estimated to be well over 100 billion, and they are unfunded as of yet. Hence, the concern in the financial markets about what the plan is to cut. And again, you might also ask a valid question, which is, eventually these will have to be funded. Will that be funded with, say, cuts to public services? Will that be funded with increase in taxation down the line? We don't know yet. But what we do know is that on the 23rd of November, there is going to be yet another fiscal statement, and that will be accompanied by the OBR forecast as well. So make of it what you will. So that's the mini budget. I am done. I'll hand over to Chris now.
Okay, thanks very much, Subra, for that. We just show our appreciation in going through things at a very rapid rate of knots, and also managing to sort of keep it relatively neutral as well, which can be difficult these days. Just a couple of things to pick up on before I ask Chris to come up and give us a short presentation on the work that RDS do. The work on the LSIP is funded by the Department for Education. It's not something that we've just thought up. We had to put a bid in against other people, and DFE awarded us that bid, and that runs through to March 2025. It is quite important. And just one final point on the last slide he put up there about the fiscal statements on November 23rd. Well, obviously that lands, I think, in the middle of the next survey period for the QES. So that could be quite another interesting presentation for Q4. Who knows? We might have another Prime Minister, we may have another Chancellor, who knows what on earth's going on. I think one interesting thing, though, is when you were struggling to try and remember when some of these measures were actually first introduced, and it's 2 years ago, it shows the rapid and the volatile nature that we've got at government in this country at the present moment in time. We all make jokes about it. I think it's really serious, actually, and we're in a not a great place. But there's some good points in this, there's some highlights, and there's still a lot of optimism out there, despite what some of those graphs may show as well. So please don't lose the faith, because we certainly won't. Anyway, we've got the slides set up now, so what I'd like to do now is ask Chris Kinane from today's sponsors, RDS, to come and explain a little bit about their work, and also maybe touch on some elements around business investment and things like that as well. So, Chris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay? Morning, everyone. I'm just going to turn this around so I can see you all. Perfect. I just want to start by thanking the Chamber for the opportunity today and the data that you produced for this, and my boss Roy as well. So my name is Chris Kinane. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager from RDS. We specialise in research and development tax relief. Some of you may be familiar with that, some of you may not. So today what I'd like to do is, following on from the data that's just been presented, hopefully we can shine a glimmer of hope for some businesses out there. So what I'll do is I'll give you an overview of the scheme. I'll explain more about us as a business and also what this means for yourselves, depending what industry you're in. So I think a good point to start with would be what research and development tax relief isn't. So it's not PPI for business. I hear that on a regular basis. It's not a scam or a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not a COVID grant or loan. And it's not applicable to every business. Any limited business could be eligible, but you have to meet certain criteria in order to claim for it. And it's not simple to do in-house. There's lots of strict reporting and technical stuff you have to put in along with your financials that HMRC scrutinise, and that's only going to get worse as well. But I'll come on to that a little bit later down the line. So what is research and development tax relief? It's a government-led incentive that allows businesses that have overpaid on their corporate tax bill to claim that money back. It's been going for 22 years now, and the purpose is to allow businesses to sort of grow, innovate, and remain competitive within their relative fields. It's classed as an advance in science, technology, or process. Don't be put off by that, because you use these terms and people think of scientific labs and things like that, but literally any limited company could be eligible for this scheme. So it's for businesses that innovate, change, adapt, modify, or improve their services, systems, or products. I think better, lighter, faster, stronger, etc. And it's also a fantastic opportunity for businesses to put money back into their operations. So some key stats that sort of echo what Subra mentioned earlier. So HMRC, most relevant data is March of 2020, but there were 85,900 R&D claims that went through. If you think there's 4 million limited companies in the UK, that's actually quite a minimal amount. Of that same period, £7.4 billion went back into these businesses. Each year, these numbers are increasing, but the uptake's nowhere near where it should be. As Subra mentioned, the uptake is mainly centred in London and the southeast, so other regions, i.e. the northwest, the awareness of this isn't up there where it should be. So that's pretty much why I'm here today. Main sort of sectors that take up the most value from these claims is your information and communication, manufacturing, scientific, technical, so construction, things like that. But again, please do bear in mind, any limited company could be eligible for this scheme. Overview of main industries here. So the ones we've covered off, but if you have a look, there's transport and logistics, there's food, drink, nutrition, social work, education. So in that regard, say you've invested in some bespoke software systems, regardless of your industry, you could be eligible to claim some cost back on that. As mentioned earlier, there's a number of changes coming in April next year. So HMRC are going to become a lot more stringent. They've got a team of 200 people. The technical reports that are submitted with these claims moving forward are going to be scrutinised a lot. That's what we do for a living. We write these reports on behalf of our clients and make sure they meet the standards of HMRC. They're going to have to be submitted digitally, and there's going to be limited relief for UK subcontractors. What that means is, at this moment in time, say you've got a subcontractor that manufactures for you in Thailand, for example. Right now, you can claim some of those costs back. Moving forward from next year, it will only be UK-based subcontractors that you will be eligible to put in that claim. You're going to have to notify HMRC within 6 months of when you're going to claim. This could throw off a lot of businesses as well. Again, that's something we're geared up for as a business. And there's going to be some additional eligible claims that you can put in. So this is going more down the route of big data, cloud storage and things like that for pure computation, but that's not been fully signed off yet. In terms of timescales and process, so how it works is, depending when your financial year ends, say it's October, for example, up until that time lapses, you can go back 2 financial years. So any activity that is eligible in that period, you can claim back for. So if your year end is October, I'd recommend giving me a shout sooner rather than later. So there's 6 eligible areas, how the claim is valued. So salary versus time, that's effectively the percentage of time you spend either as a business owner or your team on what's deemed as research and development versus the salary. You can then take that percentage and claim back the tax, national insurance and pension contributions. If you've got a team of 10 people and you go back 2 years, it can be quite a big figure. Subcontractors, as mentioned, currently you can claim for overseas. Next year it's UK only, but you can claim back up to 65% of those costs. Certain travel costs, wastage of materials. We all know what's happened with the prices of materials, and I'll come on to that in a little bit later in this presentation. But this could be key for certain businesses in order of claiming it back, and likewise utilities. So same percentage of your salary, keeping the lights on in your warehouse, for example, you can claim back your heating and electricity and whatnot. And then certain software costs. Again, that's going to change next year. It's going to become more detailed. So in terms of actually reporting, you have to write a complex technical report. This is what we do as a business. It can take 2 or 3 weeks. but we reduce your time, but again, I'll mention that a bit later down the line. So you have to explain the challenge, you have to identify the technical uncertainty that you've encountered, you have to explain where the innovation lies, while sticking to HMRC's sort of standards when you put these reports in, and you have to have live examples of eligible work to put in. They don't go war and peace, they just want sort of 1 or 2 examples for each financial year. I'll move on to the business. So we're a UK limited company. We're based in Altrincham. We're a very active member of the Chamber of Commerce, part of the Trafford Borough. And again, I would reiterate at this point, for any business, if you're not already a member, I would speak to the Chamber, because they've been great for us, and they're going to be vital for some businesses to navigate these challenges that are coming up. I mean, look at the data that they've just shared today. So yeah, I'd recommend speaking to the team. So our business was founded by Mark Joyner in 2017, and the Business Growth Fund partnered with us in April of this year. I'll give a bit more information on them in a moment. So we currently have 200 partners over, majority of whom are accountants. So we partner with accountants. They don't offer this as a service. We do it on their behalf. And over 600 clients, the majority of whom, depending on their activities, do claim with us year on year. We purely specialise in research and development tax relief. We have no interest in coming and taking other financial products off you and putting your accountant out. We just specialise in this. And so far, we've identified over £140 million worth of eligible spend, which translates to over 27 million in tax refunds that have gone back into businesses to grow further. We offer a personal service. You'd have a dedicated account manager. You wouldn't be getting passed around multiple people in the team. We're extremely efficient and proactive with how we operate. We can turn cases around in 2 to 6 weeks. There's been instances where we've done it quicker, depending where year ends are. And yeah, if you have a look, this is just our org chart. On the left-hand side is the team that I sit in. So we're business development, account management. And then on the right-hand side are our financial analysts. They come from various different backgrounds, such as law, finance, etc. I refer to them as our engineers. They're the ones that go out and write the technical reports and calculate financials. Very brief overview for any of you that don't know who the Business Growth Fund are. They've got a sheet balance over 2.5 billion, over 400 companies in their portfolio, and they're backed by a number of high street banks. Benefits of working with us. So again, you've got a dedicated business development / account manager, and you will have a dedicated financial analyst that you'd work with during the period of our relationship. We enjoy face-to-face work, and we're out on site all the time dealing with our clients and picking up information there. We offer a free eligibility check for anyone that's interested. So literally a 15-minute conversation with myself, I quite quickly be able to determine whether or not there is any potential research and development in your activities, and it costs nothing. So yeah, minimal time required. Typically, all in all, it's about 2 hours of your time. I'll come into that in a bit more detail as well later on. We use modern communication, so we've heavily invested in a technology hub, which is going to be helpful for the changes moving forward, and also streamlines the entire process. And we're extremely transparent with what we do, and we don't charge unless we're successful. Only once you had your benefit in hand would we charge you for the work done. So very quickly, the hub we've invested in. So this would be your main screen. You'd be able to see who your account manager is and your financial analyst, and an overview of where the claim's up to. This is where it gets a bit more interesting. So you can see exactly where your claim's up to, what's outstanding, whether it's your side, our side, or your accountant, for example. Be able to upload information relating to the claim. So you get full transparency of that. And then this is probably our USP as a business. So using the same communication, it's you can upload documents, you can type in technical reports. Over the next financial year, as you're going through your activities, in real time, you can put information up there. So you could be on the shop floor, you've just completed a project, you pull your phone out, upload a voice note, that's there then. It's also a benefit in the sense that if HMRC do want to see something, it's a simple click of a button and there's full transparency for them there. We've also got a referral scheme as well, so we partner with accountants, as mentioned, but also a number of clients, and we basically pay a fee for any simple introduction you would do. Some of our clients use that to claim back the fees they pay to us. So why do businesses choose us? We understand your business and needs, we get to know your goals, what you're going to do with this money, where's it going to go, where are your struggles, minimal time spent by the client involved in the process. So minimum time, we maximise the claim, we're specialists, we know exactly how to do that. All relationships built on trust, and we offer a personal service. after sales. So we would deal with HMRC and any questions that they might have moving forward. Not a lot of businesses that do what we do offer that. So yeah, moving on from that then. So I suppose in reflection of the data that's just been shared here, what would that mean for you as a business? So I won't rehash the information. We know how it looks here. Cash flow is on the decline. Bit cheesy here, but a wise man once told me that sales are vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. And I don't think that could ring true more so than this moment in time. So two facts to look at here, just as an example, but bear in mind what I'm going to talk about could be relevant through all operations within your businesses, depending where needs lie. But let's look at investment in machinery and equipment. It's on the decline. How a business is going to grow if they can't manufacture more efficiently. So the average claim in the UK is actually around £55,000. So if you bear that in mind, think of what you could invest in. Could you buy new machinery? Could you adapt current machinery? Could you custom build some software that's going to make things more efficient? And then in the flip of that, you're reinvesting, probably doing more research and development. Therefore, your claim year on year will increase and repeat each year. Again, looking at training and also considering recruitment within this same bracket. If you think of the 55k again, what could you do that? Could you go on a recruitment drive? Could you find someone that's more senior to bring into the business to help things grow forward? Could you redeploy that money within your current team and retrain them on skills that could help the business grow further? It's obviously whatever works best for you. Quick case study. So again, this is another member of the chamber that we met recently, company called Jigsaw Controls and K-Tech Engineering. Paul Wilkes is the managing director of those businesses. I met him at an event here a few months ago, but in short, he saw a 300% increase in material costs because he uses plastic for his products. Obviously a big issue there, but within 3 hours of his time, we basically found him £18,500 that he can use to put back in the business. He'd used one of our competitors in the past. It took 20 hours in total. We did it in 3. So we're a lot more efficient, and that's only improving with the technology we've invested in as well. Sort of in closing, research and development's about creating a superior or better way of doing things, whether that's technical or scientific, and it's applicable across all industries provided the eligibility is met. It looks at how businesses have creatively overcome technical challenges, complexities, and innovated within their relevant industry. So there are my contact details. If you're a bit unsure at this moment in time, I'd just recommend it's a 15-minute conversation. It costs nothing. I'll be able to quickly establish if there's anything there within your business. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I'd like to open to any questions in regards to that. But again, thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chris. And if you just show our appreciation. He did say before and he was going to go through it at a rapid rate of knots, but that was very impressive. So we'll be sending out those slides afterwards. But again, I think, from the point of view of what you've heard in the main QES and obviously using those slides there and everything, there's a real great service there. And when businesses are trying to maximise cash and wring every little last bit of cash out of their investments and things like that, something like this could come just at the right time because margins are getting tighter and tighter. £18,500 or whatever it could make all the difference. So it's as simple as that. So please, if anybody has got any questions or they want to have a quick chat with Chris, all right, they're here at the front for when we finish. Has anybody got any questions? We're overrunning a little bit, but we were a little bit late starting, so I'm not too bothered about that. But we've just got a couple of minutes left. If anybody has got any questions, either of Subra or Chris or me, you might want to ask me. Gentleman there, yeah.
We are representing Chambers of Commerce from Pakistan. We are representing the FTC Federation of Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Firstly, thank you for extending the invite to us. We just want to thank GMCC for that and also taking us through the QES just to make our delegates aware about the economic situation here so that when we discuss about the collaboration later on, we are aware of what is the economic situation here locally. I just want to build on to something that you said, and also Chris mentioned that there are different things that businesses can do to identify what works for them. So our delegates will be around if there's any collaborations that Pakistan businesses can facilitate with were Manchester-based businesses, while you have this gloomy outlook, then we would be happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you very much. And again, it's great to have you here today. And like I said, we've got another session coming up in a bit. I think the only thing I'll say is that, you know, sometimes it's very easy when things are difficult to get very insular and just focus on the here and now in front of what people face. And I think sometimes you just got to lift the heads up a little bit, and to hear yourself speak like that, and you know, there's a lot of businesses out there, isn't there? And there's a lot of different things and whatever. So the more we can make of those opportunities, I think that is absolutely right. And I think the only other thing to say is, despite, you know, the numbers that you've seen here, whatever, you know, Greater Manchester is still very much open for business. You know, and it's great. We'll have a conversation later on to explore that in a little bit more detail. And like I said, we've got the mayor coming to join us a little bit later on. So that's a really superb opportunity. And if we see anything, we've got to make sure something happens. You know, too often we have the conversation and then it drifts on a little bit. Things change and whatever. So, you know, if we can see something there and then, let's make it happen. Because if we don't, we'll just live to regret it. So thank you very much. It's great to welcome you all to Greater Manchester, to the Chamber as well. So there's always opportunities there. If nobody has got any questions, we'll be around for a little bit afterwards. And obviously, you've got a great room full of delegates here. Like I said, it's been interesting. Like I said at the start, you know, we live in interesting times, don't we? And challenging times as well. Let's be completely honest about this. But we're all still here. We're still getting responses, and we've seen worse than that, and we've come through it. And I think sometimes it's worth remembering that. And some of the doom-laden headlines we've seen in the papers and talk about IMF interventions and this, that, and the other. That's happened, and we've come through it, and we've got stronger on the back of it. So yeah, times are tough, but we've just got to be aware of those opportunities and able to pick up those opportunities and make the most of them when they come. So thank you very much for giving your time this morning. Thank you for anyone watching on YouTube. Sorry, there's a question at the back. Sorry. That's okay, Phil. Absolutely. Thanks, Philomena. Oh, no, it's okay. Feel free.
I'm sorry. No, that's fine. That's fine. Now, I think recruitment activity will continue, and it's a combination of factors which have resulted in the high number of vacancies. So if I use that as a sort of an indicator for recruitment activity, there was a report, you know, which has very clearly said that we have some people taking early retirement, so people in their 50s, for example, taking early retirement. So we're losing actually talent from the workforce. So absolutely, you know, recruitment will, you know, we are recruiting at the moment, and fortunately we have had 60 plus applications, right, which is very good. And I know that many businesses are trying to recruit, and I think that's a trend that's going to stay, because when we are coming back off wage inflation and so on, the only way in which we can actually sustain the business is by widening the talent pool within the organization. So I expect it may come down slightly. You know, vacancies of 1.3 million in the economy is not that great. You look at that's 2-3% of the population.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these things. It'll carry on, maybe at a slower rate, but it will carry on. It's when it stops completely that the problems really do start. So we can see that.
Absolutely. I mean, but that's precisely why I think people will also be looking for jobs of higher earnings. Yeah. So The only thing is that it might put pressure on business cash flow, but people will continue to seek jobs. And you know, the deficit in talent and experience is in that sort of very senior level. And somebody who is, say, taking early retirement at the age of 55 has probably got 30 plus years of experience. That's what we need to do.
Cool. Sharon.
I just wondered what the plan was in terms of how you're going to get the message out there to the wider employers of the business to get the information and also create a plan.
I'm just going to say, where's Jo? She's gone. She must have known you were going to ask the question. It's a really good question. And again, you know, just because we are, as the Chamber of Commerce, the lead body, the designated body that's leading on this, this goes beyond our membership. It's got to. We've already had contact with other business organisations in Greater Manchester, so FSB, CBI, IOD, Pro Manchester, and whatever. And the idea is that we will have those conversations so they can approach their members to make sure they're engaged with it. We're working with all the sort of partners that we come across that are engaged with the Chamber already. We've had offers around things, for example, like the Asian Business Forum and all those sort of things. And Jo Price, who some of you may know, has worked at the Chamber some time. We've taken her on as a communications and engagement manager specifically to make sure that we are fully out there and in front of as many people as possible with this. You've not seen anything yet. That's because we've not done anything yet. So that starts in the next couple of weeks. To be quite honest, we're just in the middle of just dotting the I's and crossing the T's on a plan and a funding application that's got to be in at DFE on Monday for the next stage of activity, which will start sort of second week in October. And you know, it's no stone unturned. We're running events, all sorts of things there, but it isn't just about, you know, the 4,200 members that we've got in GMCC. It goes beyond that. It's got to, because that's the remit we're working to from DFE. So, but you know, tell people, and I know you have, Sharon. So it's, I'm still wading through all the emails, but it's great. I mean, quick example: Sharon's our Stockport local president. And she does a great job letting people know, like what Chris has said about the benefit of being in the Chamber. Certainly on the skills stuff, she's been speaking to the right people. They've been getting in touch with me, and we've been able to do some work, or will be doing some work in the future. That's what it's all about. That's what this business community bit is all about in Greater Manchester. Because if we can't help each other, then who's going to do that? And obviously, when we've got our friends and colleagues from overseas with us as well, that just makes it even stronger, doesn't it? So I think I'll finish there, because that's a really positive note, isn't it? Steve, it's got to be positive, otherwise we're gonna finish on a low. So come on, no pressure. Yeah, I can tell you that it's worth up to £550,000 up to March 2025. Sorry, Steve. Now there's a question. At this stage, I'll say probably, but bear in mind that the LSIPs run right through the rest of England. It's not in the devolved nations, and we've got the same amount as, say, some more rural areas that have that. Bear in mind the size of the Greater Manchester economy, the number of employees, the number of businesses, etc., etc. We are second to London in the South East. London have got double that money. We've got the same as everywhere else in the UK. I'll let you form your own conclusions on that. But at this stage, we could possibly see some time having to go back and say, look, actually, if you want us to do this properly, we're probably going to need a bit more money. So, but obviously, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, we've probably got enough to do, you know, what needs doing. But like I said, it's very early stages yet. That's sort of positive, so we'll finish there. Okay, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's great to see everyone. Like I said, you know, let's get out there. Let's carry on doing what we're doing and do what we do best. And thank you for your time. Look out for the Q4 survey. And just one thing, next Thursday, the 6th of October, I think it is, there's another event being run looking at maximising minimising your business costs and maximising how you run your business as well. That will pick up on some other sources of help to make sure that businesses can tackle what the current market conditions are throwing at them. So that's 6th of October that event is taking place. Thanks so much for your time. And once again, let's keep going and doing what we do best. Thank you very much.